Is it actually doing something?
And we're live. Welcome, everybody. This is the pilot episode of the Humblecast, as I call it. It is a simple, unassuming little corner of the internet where everyone who participates can talk about whatever she or he wants. No lofty ideals or pretentious titles here, just a simple folk doing simple things. With me today, or tonight, depending on what side of the world you're on, is Joe from X Corn Muffin X. Joe, how are you?
I am all right. It is morning time here. It's Wednesday morning here in Tokyo. I'm, depending on where you are, it's Tuesday or Wednesday, but it's Wednesday here. It's all right. Not so bad.
Awesome. So before we start with our first topic, I'd like to do a what I call the OOTB question, which is the out of the blue question. And here it goes. Are you ready?
All right, go for it.
The word dwarf, should it be pluralized as dwarves with a VES or dwarfs with an FS?
VES, I believe, is correct. Dwarfs sounds weird.
It does sound weird. It doesn't roll off the tongue as much.
I'm not sure if there's an actual correct spelling for that. I'm not sure what it is, but I'm pretty sure it's dwarves with a VES.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I've ever seen it FS. Kind of a
Tolkien. John Ronald Reuel Tolkien, the author of The Lord of the Rings, is the one who modernized that the pluralization of dwarves. So if Tolkien says it's correct, then I go by what he says.
I would tend to agree with that.
Okay, well, now that we got that out of the way, I'd like to go a little bit into the past and talk about, I'm sure it's something that's very close to your heart. And when I think of the PC Engine, I think of you, and that's the topic. The PC Engine. Now, I know that was your system. So, tell me how you got acquainted with the PC Engine or TurboGrafx 16. And was it Christmas time? Tell me your story.
I got the TurboGrafx like pretty close to when it came out. I want to say like within like the first month or two of when it came out, and like what happened was it came out right near my birthday, and also the Sega Genesis came out at the same time, like 2 weeks apart or something. It's like some really, or like maybe a month. I don't remember exactly, but they came out really close to each other. And the TurboGrafx, a friend of mine actually had a Genesis. He got it like on launch day or whatever. And, I didn't have one, but a couple months after that was my birthday. And the TurboGrafx came out, and I was like, well, I guess I will get the TurboGrafx because my friend has the Genesis, so we can get twice as many games. And so that was it. And I picked up the TurboGrafx for Christmas, and I believe, well, it came with Keith Courage and Alpha Zones. And I believe I also got Bonk's Adventure with it, though.
Oh, that's a good one.
I might be remembering that incorrectly. I did have Bonk, and but I got a bunch of games later on also. So
awesome. Bonk's Adventure. When I think, now I have that song in my head, like the level 1 song, but I especially have the little music that plays whenever Bonk eats that piece of meat and it becomes invincible.
Oh, yeah. That little...
yeah. Do you have that in your head now?
Fast repeating jingle or whatever it is?
Yes. Yeah,
that's it. That's definitely it.
That's such a good game, and it has aged surprisingly well. You look at Bonk's Adventure or PC Genjin, as it's in Japanese. It has aged really well. It looks nice. It looks colorful. It looks cartoony. It's such a good game.
I definitely agree with that. I mean, I played that game a million times. I played through it a ton of times. It was like the only game my sister liked to play besides Klax. and it was the kind of thing like it does look really nice. And comparatively, at the time, you had like most people didn't have a Genesis or a TurboGrafx. Everybody had a Nintendo, and comparatively, there's like no comparison. It's like the
Night and
TurboGrafx
day.
is, yeah, it's like such a huge step up from what everybody else was doing. And I think at the time that was kind of the draw of it. It had a bunch of stuff that I was interested in, and the Genesis actually, when it came out, it didn't have a ton of really good stuff. I mean, when it launched, it came with like Altered Beast. It wasn't like Sonic wasn't out, and it came with, like the launch titles were things like I think Michael Jackson's Moonwalker and Columns and maybe, oh wait, what was the Fist of the North Star game? Last Battle, maybe?
Oh my god. Yes,
So like
Last Battle.
the launch for the Genesis wasn't like super hot, you know what I mean? Like it wasn't, it's and actually I liked Altered Beast in the arcade, and I thought like that was probably the coolest game that was out when the Genesis launched. But like when the TurboGrafx launched, it had a bunch of stuff that no one had seen before, like Bonk and Keith Courage and stuff. And I thought like, well, that looks pretty cool. So I went with that. And it is the kind of thing where, in retrospect, it wasn't like a super good choice in terms of like the amount of software, but like it was a good choice in the sense that like there was a lot of quality titles that did come out for the TurboGrafx, or I mean, and especially on the PC Engine, but that's like totally different because when I was a kid, obviously I didn't have access to PC Engine titles until almost like I want to say like 7 or 8 years later.
There's a funny picture that somebody on DeviantArt made. Let me see if I can screen share it with you. It's you're familiar with Thwomp from the Super Mario Brothers. He's a stone ghost that falls on the into castles and whatnot. Let's see.
Yeah.
Can you see it?
um,
I always like that picture. Like,
oh yeah. Okay, yeah, that's
that's a good one. It's a really good one. So, Bonk's Adventure. Actually, Hudson Soft was. Let's see. They had Bomberman, which was one of their mascots. They had Bonk. They had Takahashi Meijin, which is Master Higgins' Adventure Island.
yes.
They had quite a few games on the PC Engine / TurboGrafx that were really colorful. I was actually playing a new Adventure Island a few days ago, and same thing as with Bonk's Adventure. That game has aged particularly well because it has a sort of colorful, cartoony vibe to it. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the TurboGrafx is actually able to display more colors than the Genesis on screen. At least that's what it looks like.
Yeah,
when
it
you look
definitely is.
comparatively.
The Genesis has like a really poor color display. I mean, I think it's 64 colors on screen for the Genesis at any time. Like it's the reason why the video on the Sega CD looks so awful is because it can only be 64 colors. But
Yes.
the TurboGrafx has like 512 simultaneous colors or something. It's a lot higher. So of course, like everything is more colorful.
That's a big difference, yeah.
Yeah, that was like one of the worst parts about the Genesis is like the color palettes were always like really simplified for everything. When you look at games that are made on say the Genesis and the Super Nintendo, or the Genesis and the TurboGrafx or the PC Engine or whatever, usually the colors are almost always better on the other systems because the Genesis has such a low color palette.
Yes, it is. Rise from your grave. Altered Beast.
That was the that's actually also on the TurboGrafx Altered Beast, and the Rise from Your Grave part is actually kind of clearly spoken because it's a disc game.
Oh yes, that would change the entire. I think the early philosophy of the Genesis was bringing arcade hits to your living room. And in fact, Sega is an arcade game manufacturer primarily, so I guess they wanted to sort of replicate the experience that you had at the arcade on the Genesis. Of course, kind of lost in the transition, but it wasn't until Sonic, I'd say it wasn't until like '91 when they got Sonic that the Genesis was really like a force to be reckoned with.
Yeah, I would agree. In the sense that, like, if you look at the launch for the Genesis, a lot of the games that came out were arcade games. I mean, Moonwalker and not Columns. I don't think Columns was in the arcade, but
Wasn't
Altered
it
Beast
Golden
was.
Axe?
Golden Axe also, yeah. Those were all arcade games, and they were popular. I think it would be hard to imagine it now if you play Altered Beast, but it was like a really popular game in the arcade. Um, Golden Axe especially was quite popular, and when you'd go to an arcade, or like I had a lot of local areas with games in my when I was a kid, so like I lived like right across the street from like a little shopping mall type area. So there was an arcade, and there was a bowling alley with also a little arcade inside, and then there was like a Dairy Queen that had ga- game machines, and all of those places had games like Altered Beast and Golden Axe, and all the time people would be like hopping on those and playing multiplayer Golden Axe or whatever, and it's a lot of fun in the arcade. And it
Yeah, Golden
actually
Axe
did
is mind
translate
blowing.
pretty well into the Genesis. If you've ever played the PC Engine version of Golden Axe, it's terrible. Um, it's really bad, and
Hmm.
compared to the Genesis version, where it's like really good. The only benefit to the PC Engine version is that it has like a story, like a real story with the characters coming in and talking and interacting with people. That doesn't happen in the
Mm-hmm.
Genesis version, but the PC Engine
Oh,
version actually like gives you motivations for each character and why they're doing these things. But the gameplay itself is
right.
awful.
Well, I guess that's not a very good trade-off then.
Yeah, it's not really. It's worth playing once, I think, just to get the stories, to be like, oh, I had no idea that Axe Battler had this crazy story going on. But like
Hmm.
the gameplay, I think it's the PC Engine version is might be a port from the Amiga version, which is also awful.
Oh,
It's a really weird thing where like it's a very bad port, but they can't all be winners.
right. Well, the Mega Drive slash Genesis and the PC Engine, I guess they both had their mascots, and I'm not sure if like nowadays mascots are as important, but back then mascots were everything. They had a mascot for pretty much any product that I could think of, which incidentally is our second topic, and it's mascots. And I ask you, are mascots important today to sell a product as they were 22 years ago?
Well, the thing is that I don't live in a Western country. I live in Japan, and mascots are still everywhere. I mean, they're like Sony still has mascots for their game machines and stuff in Japan. I mean, it's
Yes, they do.
Toro and Kudo, but like nobody knows them in the US. Like if you asked anybody outside of Japan, like what is the mascots for Sony, do you know? I mean, it's the kind of thing where like just nobody knows that stuff because it's not popular
Yeah.
anymore. Um, Even like there used to be so many mascots that like you couldn't even tie them down. Um, like you were mentioning earlier, Hudson has so many mascots. Like there's the Hudson Bee, there's Takahashi Meijin, there's like Bonk, and what is the main mascot for Hudson? Do you know? It's the bee, I think, but at the same time, like what is the most popular? It's probably not the bee.
Hmm.
So it's the kind of thing where like there were so many, it was just like an oversaturation where like every company ever was trying to make a mascot, and it just kind of blew up to the point where people were just like, screw these mascots, get them out of here. And that was like almost right at the PS1 era, like right then where like it the end of the 16-bit era into the 32-bit era was like the kind of point where there was almost no mascots anymore. They just tried to make them. Like stuff like Crash Bandicoot was like the only thing that was new and somewhat popular. And then like you had a million failures like Gex and what else?
Oh my god, yes.
Yeah,
I remember.
you had a ton of those, but you don't remember them because like they kind of showed up and died really
Um,
quickly.
yeah.
And then like when you get to the PS2, like can you think of any mascots at that point? Like besides ones that were like legacy mascots like Sonic?
No, I can think of new characters like Sly Cooper and what's his face, Jack and Daxter, but I can't really think of like a mascot, a face of the like say the face of the Genesis is Sonic. Like when you buy a Genesis, you immediately think about Sonic the Hedgehog, but you don't really get that with like the PlayStation or the PlayStation 2. With the PlayStation, I think it was they were trying to kind of pin Crash Bandicoot as a mascot because he was the guy who appeared in commercials and whatnot, but I think that didn't really catch on
Yeah, that's
because
the thing. It wasn't popular worldwide was the problem with Crash Bandicoot. Like it was in the commercials in the US, but like again, that was like the same time in Japan the mascot was Kuro and Toro.
right, indeed.
It's kind of a weird thing like, you know, after that like what about like even at that same time you would think like I guess Crash Bandicoot you could say is like kind of the PS1 mascot, but like they dropped him after a while. He wasn't in everything, and he
Hmm.
wasn't there from the beginning either. And you know, when you look at the same time, like what is the mascot for the Sega Saturn?
I think they wanted to kind of make Knights the mascot for the Sega Saturn, but I don't think that went very well.
Yeah, the thing is like the in the US there's like nobody remembers anything about the Sega Saturn. And in Japan, like who would you think would be the most popular character for Sega Saturn? It's probably Segata Sanshiro.
Segata Sanshiro. Yes.
I mean, he's not like
Right.
really a mascot though.
Hmm. But he will beat you up if you don't play Sega Saturn.
It's true. I mean, he has his
When
own
I
game.
think of
Like
when I think
the
of
end of
mascots and very important mascots, one of the mascots that always comes to mind is the mascot for the World Cup '98, Futix, the that little French rooster. Do you remember?
no,
Yes.
I've never seen that. I don't even know what that is.
Hmm. Well, Futix, Footix, you can look it up. He was the most memorable mascot of any of the World Cups, and I think he single-handedly uh, gave the French economy a boost because he was everywhere. You had T-shirts, you had stuffed toys. He was even featured in the International Superstar Soccer for the Konami game one year. So he was really popular. But they never had another mascot for the World Cup that was that popular. They all kind of were forgettable. And another mascot that I think appeals to older people rather than kids is the Keebler elf.
Really?
I think
Why do you think that? I mean,
well, if
it
you look
seems
at the
weird.
Keebler elf, he's kind of an older, kind of sitting down in his armchair, drinking coffee and eating shortbread. He's not very. When I think of mascots that are targeted to kids, I think of Tony the Tiger or Ronald McDonald, not the Keebler elf. I could be wrong.
Yeah, but he's like a magical elf making sweet things for children. Like I mean, it's not exactly like the kind of thing that adults are going to be like, yeah, I can kind of relate to that. I'm like a magic elf that can make sweet stuff for
Yeah,
kids.
I know. I just when I was little, when I was a kid, I I never really felt attracted to the Keebler elf as much as other mascots that were. I don't know. I just it must be just my perception. But
Yeah, that's a weird one.
yeah, it is.
It is the kind of thing where like the only thing I can think of now where like a mascot is like still kind of a mascot is Disney has, like Mickey Mouse and Nintendo has
Mm,
Mario.
yeah,
But even like for example, like even Sega, it still has Sonic still exists, but it's not like Sonic is on everything. There's not like the like in when you used to buy games from like on the Genesis or something or on the Dreamcast or whatever, it used to have that little like those little Sega points, and it would just be
yes.
like a little Sonic head with like a number in it, and those kind of things were like on everything, not like just Sonic games. But when
Yes.
you look at Sega now, like you don't see Sonic showing up anywhere but Sonic games, or like in maybe some crossover games if there are any.
No, you don't see that. Sonic is just not. I think Sonic is a little bit too 90s to be kind of hip with the kids. But they try to bring him up to date, but I don't know how well that's going with the Sonic Boom TV show. I have not watched that. So cannot say whether or not it's a success. But when you look at the 90s and the whole, attitude, Michael Jackson thing, it was everything that was necessary in that point in time. And when that time passed, Sonic kind of stopped being cool. That's the way I see it.
Yeah, it's weird because like the in the 90s, yet I think I would agree that Sonic is a real 90s character. He's like that very much that kind of like 90s attitude thing going on. And like after that kind of fell out of favor, you can't really use that character anymore. That he's so associated with that it's almost useless to have him. And I think that was like a smart thing that Nintendo did with Mario was like not giving him a voice for a really long time. So like Mario
Yeah.
could just come out and do something. And like anytime he did something, it didn't really matter because he didn't have a set personality. Like he could show up as your referee in Mike Tyson's Punch Out, but he could also show up in like golf and in any Mario game. And like nobody questioned it because it's not against his personality to do any of those things because he has zero personality.
Yeah, he's kind of the everyman, kind of the generic, not necessarily generic, but the character who can fit in any situation sort of thing is
Yeah, that's
Mario.
the thing with him is like you can't really do that with Sonic. You can't like put Sonic in a referee position and expect it to be like accepted by people. People would just be like, well that's not Sonic. Sonic has to be fast or whatever, or Sonic has to eat chili dogs or whatever Sonic does. And
Yeah.
there's none of that for Mario. Like Nintendo can like straight up change around stuff in the games, like just totally get rid of stuff. And people don't care because they expect that Mario will be different every time.
That's true. Now, there's one mascot that you'll probably be familiar with, and that's the Drake's duck.
Oh yeah, the Drake's duck.
Drake's coffee cakes. When I say Drake's coffee cakes, what do you think of?
Uh, it's weird because I really like Drake's coffee cakes, and I think like it's kind of a topic that is offbeat in the sense that like it's not a it's not a globally distributed product. It's a regional product in the United States, and like you can't get it everywhere, not even in the U.S. And even though it was eventually like bought by Hostess, um, those Drake's products don't go everywhere still. They're still regional. It's weird that like I don't know. I think people didn't have the same kind of thing because Drake's had all these products and they were kind of like a northeastern kind of company in the US, and they made a ton of products that were like different versions of Hostess products or their own products in themselves, and they were always better. So like, Hostess has coffee cakes, but Drake's has coffee cakes too, and the Drake's coffee cakes are like 20 times better than the Hostess coffee cakes. So
Oh,
it's when I eat them, it's the kind of thing
definitely.
where
All Drakes
the
in
thing,
Massachusetts.
yeah, Drake's is big in the Northeast, and strangely, the Northeast and Florida. I don't know how that happened, but
Hmm. Well, Drake's coffee cakes. I actually first time I tried one of those on as per your recommendation. I like the crumbly ones. I think it was like a strudel top, and it was like, where have you been all my life?
yeah, that's the thing is like if you've had like a Hostess coffee cake, the strudel part on the top is totally different. It's like looks like it came out of a like pressed out of a strainer or something. It's
Yes.
like really weird looking. But
Yes.
the Drake's kind, that's way over the limit for good. It's super
Yes.
great.
Well, Drake's is better because it actually tastes better, but a lot of Hostess fans will beg to differ. Which brings us to our next topic, which is brand loyalty. Um, how would you define brand loyalty, and how does it originate?
Well, I think the problem with the brand loyalty overall is that you have this kind of strange thing where brand loyalty makes sense in some cases and it totally does not in other cases. Um, for example, when we're talking about food here, um, this kind of brand loyalty makes sense because usually, in most cases, a brand has their own flavor. So when we're talking about Drake's coffee cakes versus Hostess coffee cakes, there is a marked difference in the way those things are made. Um, you can't eat a Hostess coffee cake and then like claim it's the same because they're both coffee cakes. Like you can't just it's not the same. So when you have that kind of brand loyalty, it's not really a brand loyalty so much as it's that recipe. Like, if Hostess made better coffee cakes, I'd eat those. So it in some cases it really makes sense to have your kind of brand loyalty, whereas in other cases you have um think like in video games is a good example of where it's a bad idea to have brand loyalty. Um because you end up in stupid situations like if you're like totally into PlayStation, for example, and then like suddenly all the games you like are made by Nintendo, you're you're kind of screwing yourself. It's the kind of thing where like, well, I really like platformers, but I also really love the PlayStation brand. And you're just like, well, Nintendo's probably making the best ones right now, so you should probably get a Wii U. And you'd be like, nope, just get a PS4 because I only like Sony. It's not like a brand loyalty that makes any sense. There's no reason to prefer that kind of thing over the other when it's not beneficial to you. And I think a lot of people get into that situation where there are kind of these brand loyalties that people have terrible situations with where like you've been online, obviously you've seen comment sections where people fight it out over which is better between systems or what is better between like ports of the same game and stuff like that. It's the kind of thing where it's just like brand loyalty taken to the level of stupid. And I think
My my applesauce is better than your applesauce.
yeah, but even then like with applesauce it actually makes sense because it actually could be different. But like when you're thinking of you know if you got I want to say I'm trying to think of something that is recent, but for example, you got the latest Call of Duty on Xbox One, and I got the latest Call of Duty on PS4. Like the differences are going to be so negligible that it like wouldn't really matter if we swapped copies entirely. But there, at the same time, there'll be people who will, you know, look for these little tiny differences that like, oh well, the maybe the Xbox internet is slightly better, or maybe the graphics on the PS4 are slightly better, so this one is obviously the better version, so the PlayStation wins. It's that kind of thing that is like this stupid level of brand loyalty that is kind of, you know, a bad thing overall. Whereas like, you know, it makes sense to have like some loyalties, but I think like your loyalties should be loyal only as far as the kind of when the next the next game comes out. It's the kind of thing where like
Yeah.
if it's something bad, you shouldn't like think about, well, it's this brand. You should think about, well, this is bad, and you know, be objective about it.
Mhm. That's one thing that you're familiar with Jim from Kid Shoryuken, the channel Kid Shoryuken.
Yes.
That's one thing that Kid Shoryuken said in 2012, and it's been ingrained in my mind ever since. That buying a video game nowadays seems to have become like voting, in which these people are kind of like buying to support a certain company, or they're kind of wanting to go with the winners and not with the losers. And it's ridiculous because there's one thing about commerce, and it's that publicly traded companies, they don't care about you. They care about what they've always cared about, and that is making a profit. And when I go to the shop and I buy the game, I'm buying a consumer product, something that I want for myself. I'm not voting for my favorite company. And I've actually heard people say, like, oh, I don't like this Nintendo game, but I'm going to buy it to support the company. And I think that is the ultimate ridiculousness, because you're not, I mean, you're going to buy something that you don't like just because you want to give the company money. How ridiculous is that? You're not voting for a political party, you're buying a consumer product. But, well, what do I know, right?
Well, I think like there's a thing where like there that makes sense in some cases. Not to buy a game you don't like, but it does make sense to buy, like for example, it makes sense to buy a game you like new as opposed to used for a company you like. And because like the price difference will be negligible, but like in the used case, the company that actually made the game will get $0. And in some cases that matters. For something like, you know, but for something like Nintendo or Microsoft or Sony or whatever, it doesn't really matter if you do that, because the numbers we're talking about here is like a much larger scale. But when you're talking about like a game that sells 10,000 copies total, you know, it kind of is a bigger cut of what matters. And I think that it is kind of silly. Like I don't like, there's companies I like that consistently make good games, but again, I don't buy all their games just because they're made by that company. Um, I obviously put some thought into what I buy, and then if it doesn't look like something I want, or it's not good, then I won't buy it. It's that simple. Even if it's someone I like, and even if it's someone I like and they make a bad game, I'm willing to say like, yeah, this one was shit. I'll give you guys the benefit of the doubt, though.
Yeah, it's kind of like that when, because I love Capcom. I've always loved Capcom, and every Capcom game that I bought, I've enjoyed. But I haven't really bought many Capcom games. The last one I bought was DuckTales Remastered, and that was last year. But I really enjoyed that game. And the same thing with Konami. With Konami games, the ones that I really like are the Contra and the Gradius games. And the last Contra game I bought was Hardcore Uprising in 2011, which is a Contra game for all intents and purposes. And I don't buy all of their games, like Metal Gear Solid. I don't like. Not a big fan of Silent Hill. I like the first Silent Hill, and that's pretty much it. But I'm not going to go out and buy something that I don't like simply because I like the company. I think that's kind of ridiculous, but I understand where people are coming from. They do want to support the projects that they think are worthwhile. Probably with smaller publishers, like say, let's see, a good example, like Dokuro on the PlayStation Vita. I can understand that it's a small company like Game Arts putting out a product, and you really do want to support them because they're doing something different and worthwhile. In that case, I could see the logic.
Yeah, but I can see that, but I think like that's not really a brand loyalty so much as like it's someone doing something cool, so you want to support that they're doing something cool.
Hmm.
And I think like a lot of people don't really think about that. I mean, for example, last game generation or whatever, my main system was the Xbox 360. I just used the Xbox 360 because my all my friends in the US had it. So when I had to play games online, I'm playing the Xbox 360. So I might as well make it the main system I use. And the thing with that is like if I were had some kind of crazy brand loyalty to it, like I would have just bought an Xbox One immediately when it came out. And I think a lot of people did that. But I think a lot more people, which is like, you know, heartening at least, is that you know, looked at the kind of difference between the PS4 and the Xbox One and decided to go with the PS4 this time around. Or and you know, I'm sure there's people who were the opposite, where they just decided the Xbox One was better for what they wanted. But I think that's a better way to look at things. It's a better way to just look at ignore the brand and look at the quality and look at what's happening and what is the cool things you want to support out of these, you know, things you're looking at.
Right. Well, I do have a certain amount of brand loyalty for electronics, actually. Um, my brand of choice, like the Japanese brand of choice for pretty much every electronic I have, is Hitachi. I love Hitachi products because they never failed on me, and we've always kind of had a small Hitachi TV in our room. My dad he's a big fan of Sony, so all his equipment, like his video cameras, and he has a Betamax and his Trinitron television. So he was always a big fan of Sony products, and I kind of developed that towards Hitachi products because I just trust the workmanship of the company. But outside of Japan, the brand that I use for all my electronics is Philips because it's from the Netherlands. And I've had a Philips television since 2001, which is what I play all my games on. It was actually pretty ahead of its time. It supports 1080 interlace, which at the time was top of the line, and it just looks really nice. And that television is easily 14 years old, and it was produced in the Netherlands, and I've had that for years, and I love that TV. And pretty much every electronics that I have is Philips, and I haven't had to buy any Philips products in over a decade because everything I have it just works for forever and ever. So in my case, I guess durability, longevity is my main driving force behind brand loyalty.
Makes I mean that kind of loyalty in terms of your brand makes sense because if you have a good experience with a brand and for things like electronics, it's you know, it's complicated. It's not something that everybody understands. So when you have an experience where like, well, I have, you know, I bought it from this company and it's worked great and I've had no trouble with it and I've had it for 10 years, like you have a better impression of that brand. That makes sense. I mean, it's not like essentially a I mean, I guess it's a kind of loyalty, but it's not exactly the same type of thing as like a I don't know, like a fan loyalty, if you know what I mean. Like
Yes.
the you know, there's lots of people who are fans of something but totally unwilling to admit when bad things happen from that brand. Um,
Yes.
he like there's a really good example of this happening recently is Nintendo is like a huge example of this because companies you just mentioned actually Capcom and Konami have taken a huge amount of heat for stuff that they've done and like look at the like think about this. Capcom took a lot of heat for on disc DLC like with and this was from Street Fighter Cross Tekken, where there was on disc DLC and people raged and complained and they wanted to boycott Capcom and everybody was pissed off at Capcom and everybody hates Capcom now. The thing is like every single game Nintendo has released recently and every upcoming game in the future has on disc DLC. Have you heard anything about that? I mean, have you heard these huge boycott demands by swaths of people claiming that Nintendo is ripping them off with their on disc DLC? Because
I haven't.
I haven't
I
seen that
haven't heard
reaction.
much.
But if Capcom did any 1/10 of the amount of on disc DLC that Nintendo is planning and blatantly planning, like just basically telling you it's on disc DLC, there would be like so much rage. People would be out of control. So it's the kind of thing where like I don't know, people just have this bizarre brand loyalty, and especially for Nintendo, where that makes them not be able to admit when the brand Nintendo, the company Nintendo, does things that are just not acceptable. Like, did you play Fire Emblem Awakening on the 3DS?
Yes, I have that game, and it's one of
It,
my favorite games.
yeah, it's a great game. Have you been to the the DLC store for that game? Because there's 40
No,
items.
no, I made like a kind of policy this generation, and it's a no downloadable content policy. So I don't even have my systems connected to the internet. Like
Yeah,
my Wii, I do not
there,
connect that to the
there are like
internet.
about 40 DLC packs for Fire Emblem Awakening. At least in Japan, they might have grouped them together in the US into like bigger packs, but in Japan, like there's like about I think there's 38 maybe it's 36 map DLCs for Fire Emblem Awakening, where it's just like a single map for 100 yen or something. So like essentially, it's you're paying for an entire another game in just DLC of single maps in Fire Emblem Awakening. If any other company did that, people would be screaming. People would be so angry. Like they would be like, "Well, this stuff is games you could have just put into the game. You could have put this. It's just maps." Like people would freak out about that. Nintendo does it, not a word. People just love that stuff. They're just like,
Double
whatever, we love
standard.
it.
It's a
It's
double
like it's a crazy double standard where like people have these bizarre standards for other companies, but like when something they're really loyal to, some brand they're loyal to does it, they're just like, what? Didn't hear that. Sorry. Didn't see that happening. It's great. I love it. You know,
standard.
like
Yeah,
it's a really bizarre situation where like I just don't understand it. Like it is a kind of the negative side of your kind of crazed brand loyalty where like when you had mentioned that you like really love Peter Pan peanut butter or something
oh
and
yes.
I think like that's like not an irrational brand loyalty. Peter Pan peanut butter tastes different from Skippy peanut butter. It's different. I mean, it makes sense with like Nintendo like adding on this DLC. How is it any different than what Capcom did, and why is the reaction so different? That's what I. That's like it's the exact same thing, but the reaction is completely opposite. So it's the kind of
Yes.
thing where it makes me want to like smash my head into the wall. It doesn't make any
Like
sense.
Bonk.
Yeah, I climb a wall with my teeth and then smash my head into something. It's the way things
Yeah.
work.
Well, I guess I'd have to quote Garrett from Thief the Dark Project in this situation and say, fanatics make unreliable allies. And it's just a bunch of hammerites clamoring, and basically it's a double standard. And if you get that reference, congratulations. It's one of the best games I've ever played, the Dark Project. Actually, been playing that recently. I love that game. But yeah, now that you mentioned the brand loyalty from the peanut butter, I actually do have curious brand loyalty towards certain things. And like when I used to live in Minnesota about a year ago, I would go to two shops because one shop did not carry Peter Pan peanut butter and the other did not carry Smucker's apple jelly. They had Welch's, but I don't like Welch's products as much as Smucker's. So well, now that you mention it, it actually makes sense because I like the taste of Smucker's over Welch's, even though they say Welch's is organic, but I don't know, it doesn't taste as good. And Peter Pan as well. Peter Pan tastes slightly less sugary than Skippy and than Jif, so it's kind of I guess my brand of choice is Peter Pan, and the crunchy kind. Don't bring the creamy kind. So
I think those make sense though. It's the thing. It's like you wouldn't if some other company made the exact same peanut butter and it was cheaper, you wouldn't like go for the Peter Pan, would you? I mean,
no
if it
way,
were
I'd go to the Dollar Tree.
yeah, that's the thing. Like you wouldn't have a different reaction to something else just because it's not that brand. And I think
No.
that's where your kind of brand irrationality comes into play. And it's most evident with Nintendo. I don't know why. I don't know what it is about fans of Nintendo. And I know you're a Nintendo fan. Like you're a pretty big Nintendo fan.
Oh yes, I
And
love their products.
and the thing is like, but I don't understand why like the crazed Nintendo fans are the most crazed is what I what I want to say, I think.
Yeah, it's I guess it's a combination of immaturity and I guess some level of mental instability, like people who have way too much time on their hands and are either unemployed, not necessarily the case, but it's just people who don't have much to do with their time, so they employ it in BS like that. Or simply people who have not grown up and realized that this brand fanaticism, I'll call it, is actually detrimental to themselves and to the company as well, because if they don't admit that a company is making a mistake, then that company will continue to make a mistake. And what I think a lot of people don't realize is that you and I and like people on YouTube and let's say people between 30 and 35 or 37 years old, we are a minority that is practically, I would say we're about 5, being very generous, 5% of the overall market that actually consumes games. Most people our age in games anymore. They're raising families and have a job and whatnot. So I I understand the sometimes people complain about this and that, but the thing is that our group is a minority as far as I'm concerned, and yeah, that's pretty much the way it goes.
I I wonder I wonder how true that is. I know they do those things about like the percentage by age of gamers, but I always thought like the one of the biggest groups was the kind of late 20s to mid 30s group.
Hmm. Wonder how true that is.
I'm not sure. I mean, I don't have any of the. I don't have the statistics in front of me, but I have a feeling that that group is a lot bigger than you're imagining it to be. Yeah,
Might be. Yeah.
I think like the difference though is that I think that group of people is probably not the vocal group screaming in comment sections on the internet,
That yeah,
which
that could be it.
probably is warping the the image of it, because I know like I have a lot of friends who are around my age because we went to school together, but they're in the US and they have kids and they have jobs and they still play games. and but they're not on websites, and they're not on in comment sections raging about on this DLC or whatever. It's the kind of thing where it's just like a weird situation where I think like there probably is a large presence of those people buying games. It's just they're not the people who are talking about them in a kind of loud and obnoxious way.
Right. Speaking of loud and obnoxious, and let me just make a little disclaimer here. I've been really disconnected from the YouTube scene and the video game scene in general because I've been occupied with other things. But what is the deal? And explain to me, please, because I have no idea. What is the deal with the amiibo?
Oh man, I don't know what the deal with it is. Like I don't know what the appeal of it is what I want to say. But man, it's okay. Imagine the setup is like if I were to offer you a random DLC that you could put on a figure, and basically it's disc lock DLC, but like if you buy this figure you can unlock it in multiple games. You don't really know what it's going to be. It's not announced yet. You don't have any idea what that DLC will be, and it might be just a costume, or it might be a character, or it might be anything. You don't know what it is. Does that sound appealing to you?
No, it does not.
That's what amiibos are, essentially. I mean, they're figures, though. They're figures. If you like figures, if you're like totally into having like a room full of Nintendo characters, then it's probably all right, even if you don't use them as what their intended purpose of unlocking on disc DLC. But there they are. I mean, that's pretty much what they are. They're just like, like when if you've ever downloaded like a key for a software key, where it's just like you go and you download like a 100K file and it unlocks your.
Yes,
that's
I
essentially what it is. Yeah.
Bionic Commando Rearmed. I thought I was actually downloading the game, but it was just a key.
Yeah, like if you for example, like a lot of games do that, where like if you download the demo, like it's the full game just not unlocked, so you just can when you buy it, it'll just download a key.
Yeah,
that kind of thing happens. But like amiibos are essentially that key on a figure. But it doesn't unlock a full game. It just unlocks like some DLC that you couldn't get otherwise.
Extras.
Yeah.
As far as I understood, they like the NFC communication, the chip inside. I imagine it must be like flash memory or something, but it goes both ways. Like you could save information onto it and transfer. So it's kind of like a memory card sort of deal. That's what I understood from the presentation.
Not really, though. I mean, it can communicate back and forth, but it's not like a memory card in the sense that you can't save data to it that's large. It's like the cards they use to get into the train station at in Tokyo, like those little RFID cards. It's essentially one of those in a figure. It can't save a ton of information. It's a really small amount of information, actually. It's like the same amount of information probably that you could fit on a tag in Walmart or something. It's like pretty basic.
So it's not like a VMU.
No, it's not like a VMU. It's not that much stuff. Like you couldn't, I mean, it doesn't have a screen, obviously, but like you couldn't like download a game to an amiibo and then bring it over to your friend's house and like play a game through the amiibo. It doesn't have that much memory.
Right. Well, I see the appeal of the amiibos because you and I are actually opposites in a way, because you grew up in the United States and moved to Japan later in your life. And I'm the opposite. I grew up in Japan and moved to the United States later in my life. And when I was a kid and when I was growing up, Nintendo was I kind of see Nintendo as a toy company, because when I went to the mall and when I went to Hambi Town in Okinawa, which big shout out to Okinawa. It's probably my favorite place on earth, but I digress. When I went to the shopping mall in Okinawa, there were Nintendo toys, like little plastic figurines, and like the Ultra Hand. Are you familiar with the Ultra Hand?
It's a little like a stretchy, sticky hand or whatever.
Yeah, and there were like Yoshi sticky hands instead of Yoshi. Instead of a hand, it was actually Yoshi's tongue. I actually have one of those, except the tongue is filthy, so I cut it off. But I still have the little Yoshi. But Nintendo has been, in my mind, always a toy manufacturer primarily, and I even have on my desk a little plastic figure that has it's from Super Mario Brothers. It has a pipe and a seesaw and a little Mario figure, and you put Mario on the seesaw and you flick it, and Mario flips in the air and lands on the pipe. I guess it's way down in the feet so that when he flips it, he'll always land on his feet. And there, I remember there was another little Mario figure that could climb a vine, and there was another one with the Yoshi. So in my memory, as far as I remember, Nintendo has always been a toy company. They've always produced little toys like that. They were relatively inexpensive, maybe like 300 yen or something. I don't remember the exact prices, but I kind of see the amiibo as them kind of sort of returning to what they were known for, as far as in my mind, primarily they are a toy company. So I understand the appeal of the amiibo, and I was actually looking at some of them, and I would get like Marth because I like Fire Emblem, and I would primarily get the Fire Emblem characters, and Pit because I love Kid Icarus, and Kid Icarus is actually one of our favorite games, you and I included. Am I right?
Yes, I quite like Kid Icarus. I think it's one of Nintendo's best games. The Nintendo one, that is. I haven't played the one on the 3DS.
So for that reason, like because I like those characters, I can understand the appeal of getting them. I would probably get them and put them on my desk. I don't know if I would actually use them because I don't have any software right now that supports amiibos. So I actually had some software. I had Mario Kart and Super Smash Brothers, but I ended up selling them because they are principally multiplayer games, and I don't really like playing with other people, which is something I discovered recently. Um, I, I don't know what it is, but I do not enjoy playing with other people. And the only exceptions to this, the only consoles that I can play with other people and actually have fun is the Atari 2600 and the NES. That's the only thing. But I don't really like playing like Xbox or PlayStation or Wii U or anything with other people. I just don't know what it is. I don't enjoy it. So the whole multiplayer, the thing is that Mario Kart and Smash are multiplayer games. So if you don't have a good internet connection like me, I really can't connect my. I could connect my Wii U to the internet, but it won't really function the way it should because the internet here is crap. So that whole aspect is lost. So I sold it to one of my classmates who actually lives further north where there's better internet, and he actually does get together with a bunch of friends and plays it. So I just have single player games now. The most recent game that I've been playing quite a lot is NES Remix. I got the disc which has both games on it, the NES Remix pack, and that's actually a lot of fun because I love NES games. But I I was originally talking about the amiibos, right? I kind of lost my train of thought.
Yeah, but it's not a bad topic though, in that I don't really like playing games online either. Generally, when I play online, I prefer co-op online as opposed to like competitive online. So I don't really enjoy things um, like first person shooters online or something like that, because it's almost always like some kind of competitive online arena or whatever. I don't really enjoy that kind of stuff. The only thing I can think
Right.
of that I might enjoy online is fighting games. But again, I'd rather, even when I'm playing those, I'd rather just play fighting games with people I know. It's more fun that way. So if I'm playing online with
That's
people I
one.
know and it's cooperative, I'm
Yeah.
probably fine with that. If it's unless it's a fighting game, and then still fun with people I know.
That's one genre that I could never get back into after the 90s. And I used to play a lot of fighting games. I used to play Mortal Kombat, and I used to play Vampire Hunter, which is Darkstalkers, on the Saturn, actually. And I used to kick ass at it. I used to really like to play fighting games. But I think since my brother moved out of the house and I had nobody else to play fighting games with, I just don't really enjoy fighting games anymore. And I don't know, kind of playing online. First of all, I can't really play online because of my internet, and it just does not really attract me to be playing over an internet connection with somebody else. Because I think the whole, gloating and looking at the face of the person you defeated is kind of lost. And it's even fun in the arcade when you're actually playing somebody on an arcade machine. But I don't know, maybe I just haven't got. I guess the main problem is I don't really like fighting games anymore. And I have a few. I have like Fighting Vipers on the Saturn, and of course Virtua Fighter 2, because if you have a Saturn and you don't have either Daytona USA or Virtua Fighter 2, that's a strange case.
It's
And
probably that's rare. I think
it
everybody
is
has those.
very rare. And I do have uh, what's that fighting game that uh, what was it called? It's Fighters Mega. Sorry, I had a brain fart. Fighters Mega Mix on the Saturn. That's a funny game. You can play as a Daytona car.
Fighters Mega
So
Mix.
I do
That's
have fighting games, but I don't really play them that much, and I don't really enjoy playing them with other people. But what I do enjoy playing with other people is Maze on the Atari. Do you remember Maze?
Maze.
Yeah,
No,
Maze, like M-A-Z-E.
I haven't played it. I don't think I
Yeah,
have at least.
Maze is on the Atari. It's a very simple game. You're two dots. It's a two-player game. Two dots in the middle of a maze, and you have to go and find your way out of the maze. That's it. It's a very simple game, but it's so fun to play with somebody else because you're racing to the exit, and sometimes they make a wrong turn, and you don't say anything because you want to get to the end first. That's a really fun Atari game. And another game that I love to play on the NES is Super Dodgeball from the same guys that made Double Dragon. I think that's a Kunio-kun game, isn't it?
Yeah, that's a really good game. It's like it's well, I can't remember the Japanese name. It's like Kunio-kun, Dodgeball Boo or something.
That
No,
is an amazing game.
it's probably Neketsuko ko Dodgeball Boo. Datomo, I think.
Right.
So, but yeah, it is a Kunio-kun game. It's
That's
good
an
though.
awesome game.
I think the that one was a game that I played a ton as a kid because it's so goofy. Like you can you can throw the ball at the opponent so hard that they'll like get knocked off the screen and fly around the world and flop back out on the other side.
And when they die, a little angel goes up and floats out to the sky.
Yeah,
That
that's
is
a
such
really
a
good.
fun game.
It's a really good game. They've remade it a bunch of times or made kind of sequels to it. There's actually one on the PC Engine where you can fight aliens on the moon.
That is amazing. Well, do you have any other topics that you would like to bring to the table before we wrap this up?
I don't know. Should we talk about Konami, who recently has a bit of a firestorm around them?
You can talk about it because I know absolutely nothing about it. Like I said, I've been totally disconnected. But go ahead. What's the problem with
Well,
Konami?
well, Konami had recently, they have that big thing where Hideo Kojima is like pretty much left Konami, and
Hmm.
then they canceled Silent Hills, and they Did you know about Silent Hills, the latest Silent Hill game that was going to be made by Hideo Kojima and um, what's his face? What's his face? Del Toro. Forget his first name. Who did like Pan's Labyrinth?
I heard that I heard about Silent Hills, and I heard that it was Kojima who was directing the new Silent Hills, and that's as much as I heard.
Yeah, Benicio del Toro, I think. He
Benicio
was
del
supposed to
Toro.
be doing it with Hideo Kojima, and it was going to have Norman Reedus as this character. And like
Mm-hmm.
what happened, that was like they had the PT demo on the PS4 and it was like really hyped. A lot of people were really excited about it. And then like since Kojima is pretty much out of Konami, they canceled it. And people were going crazy over that. And then like what happened is they, because Kojima Studios is closed, that's like their entire studio presence in the United States. Like that's everything. It's gone. So like they delisted themselves from the U.S. stock market
Wow.
because it's not. They didn't get delisted. They voluntarily delisted themselves because they have no U.S. presence. Um, so like people are going nuts about Konami. Like, and I think like people have this bizarre image of Konami. Like I don't understand like why people have this image about Konami because Konami hasn't really made a lot of games for consoles in the past like 10 years. I mean, they've put out a bunch of stuff, but like they're not like putting out major releases. And the amount of major releases they're putting out are like really small. I mean, if you can think of like what are their major ongoing series right now, like
I
Castlevania.
think the start of the first step, sorry, of Konami kind of going in a downward spiral was when they contracted Appaloosa Interactive to make Contra Legacy of War, which I love that game, by the way, but it was universally considered one of the worst Contra titles for the PlayStation. I really haven't. Konami is a company that I actually associate more with the Super Nintendo and the NES and the actually a little bit of the Saturn, although not too much. When I think of Konami, I think of Contra and Akuma Joe Dracula, Castlevania, and Gradius. But I don't, and a little bit of like for example Rocket Knight and some side projects and Tiny Toon Adventures, which is one of my favorite Mega Drive games. But I don't really think of Konami like nowadays. Pretty much all they have is Castlevania and Metal Gear Solid. So if Metal Gear Solid is not there anymore to attract American players, like I can see the sense behind withdrawing from the stock market because, as far as I know, they don't even have Yu-Gi-Oh anymore, do they?
No, they do. They still have Yu-Gi-Oh.
Oh, they
The
do.
thing with Konami right now is that they have they have like a totally different business focus than they did like 20 years ago. And like what
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking about is that people are crying, like they're going crazy online about this, like um and like I can kind of understand people being angry about Silent Hills because it was like a kind of promising looking title for Silent Hill, which hasn't had a lot of promising titles as of late. And
Yeah, that's
um
excuse me. That's what I was thinking in the back of my head. Like, does Silent Hill actually? I mean, can you release a Silent Hill in 2015 and expect it to make as much an impact as it did in 1999 or 2001? I'm just thinking out loud. Is Silent Hill
no,
really that big of a property?
it's the thing is like you can't do the same thing over and over and have people be surprised by it. And like what happens is that game Silent Hills was looking like it would have had the ability to like kind of surprise people like Silent Hill 2 or something did. And the thing with it was is like the reason you would people were super excited was because that PT demo was such a good thing. Like it was so good as like whatever it was. I mean, it's a game. It's like a full game, I guess. That's like you can beat in a half hour, but it's it was so good and done so well that it was different than Silent Hill, but still had like the same kind of feel to it. And it did have that same kind of like hype that, like people who were like totally given up on Silent Hill were like, yeah, this new Silent Hill is going to be awesome if it's anything like this PT demo is. And it was like, I don't know, it is kind of like a crushing situation for people, but like it kind of all came together in a situation where like everyone is like, I hate Konami, I'm never buying any of their stuff anymore, blah blah blah, they're going out of business because they delisted themselves. And it's like not actually true. It's just like Konami has become a different company. They're not focused on making games for consoles. They're not focused on that anymore. Like the games they make for consoles now are like, yeah, Metal Gear will be out in September or whatever, and then after that you've got Winning 11 or Pro Evolution Soccer or whatever it's called outside of Japan. And
that's a huge game over here.
yeah, it's like one of the games that it's like probably one of Konami's biggest things. That and the baseball game they make, Powerful Pro Baseball or whatever it's called.
Do they still make that?
Yeah, comes out every year. But
I didn't know that.
That one is like besides that though, like if they're a publicly traded company, you can go to their site, you can look at their games, you can look at where they get their money. It's not from games mostly. They get like 50% of their income, pretty much 50% comes from digital products category, and this like is essentially their smartphone section. Like if you've been paying any attention to Konami for the past like 4 or 5 years, you'll know, like just by looking at what they show at Tokyo Game Show, that they've been almost entirely mobile focused for a long time now. And it makes sense because it's like literally half the money they're making for their company. And stuff like Dragon Collection, which is like their huge IP, probably nets them more than like anything else that they do. And then like don't
they have Pachinko also?
Yeah, they have that also. It's like part of their amusement section, which like includes like a bunch of stuff, but that one is like pretty low on the list. But it's that is like one of their growing sectors. If you look at their, I mean, like I said, it's publicly traded. You can just look at their information. They print their quarterly reports. So if you go and look at it, you can see like, okay, games for Konami is like maybe the third or fourth item on the list. It's like, the first thing is going to be their smartphone section. So I guess that's kind of games, but it's not in the same category as like your consoles. And then the next thing after that is like health and fitness. Like they run health, like gyms in Tokyo and Japan, all over the place, I guess.
Yeah.
But they,
if you're a business, I guess it makes sense. I mean, you have to think about what is best for your business. And I think that's what a lot of these people don't really understand, is that these game makers, game manufacturers, they are businesses. And when you're a business, that you have to think about, will this be profitable or will it flop? And is there a market for this? Regardless of whether or not somebody may like their product, they have to think about that.
Yeah, that's the thing. I think like people have this idea that like, Konami is like just this game manufacturer. I mean, they're like the 5th biggest game manufacturer. Like, and they like a lot of their money doesn't come from games. They're like counted as a game manufacturer, but they don't have the same kind of, they don't have the same kind of stake in it. And I think that it goes over people's heads. Like they don't think about it like the same way as, it's like a different kind of business model in Japan for these companies. Like Konami is not like a game company. I mean, they are, but they do so many other things. My local gym, it's run by Konami. They do that. But a lot of companies do that too. And I think people don't see that, if game consoles died for whatever reason, people stopped buying them, Nintendo would probably just do something else. It's not like they haven't done it before. And
or love motels.
Yeah, it's the kind of thing where a lot of companies are rather diverse in terms of the stuff they do. Much more so than US companies are. When you think of a game developer in the US, you don't think of a company that's running sports gyms or whatever. It just doesn't come to mind. But in Japan, that's not out of the range of possibility. And in this case, the gyms actually make more money than the game section for Konami.
Yeah, when you think of Takara, for example, they make bicycle equipment and they also make arcade games.
Yeah, there's a lot of examples like that. It's just Takara Tomy or whatever. They make toys. They make everything.
Yeah, and Bandai.
Yeah, Bandai is all over the place. They do a million things.
They make some of my favorite Gunpla figures.
Yeah, they make figures. They do anime. They make games. They do all types of stuff. I mean, there's so much stuff related to them. It's all over the place. They have an online streaming service. They have all types of crazy stuff going on.
Well, I guess somebody went to the Konami headquarters and destroyed the core. Sorry, had to make that. And the fanboys want to fly over to the headquarters in Tokyo. Konami in Tokyo or in Kyoto? I don't remember.
I don't know actually. Some of those places were close by. There used to be I used to live I actually still live pretty close to Koei's Tecmo Koei, I guess. Koei Tecmo. I don't remember what they are now. Their headquarters. It used to be. I used to pass it every day on my way to work. Could see it from the train, but now that I work in a different location, it's I don't see it anymore. But it's still pretty close. But I'm not sure where Konami is. It's probably Tokyo, though. It's a safe bet to say Tokyo because, it's a safe bet to say Tokyo for pretty much anything in Japan.
Right. Well, I guess we can wrap it up. But before we wrap it up, I'm going to make my an outro, which it will be another OOTQ, which is an out of the blue question. So, are you ready?
All right.
If you had a chance to perform one Hokuto Hyakuretsu Ken on anyone in this moment in time, and turn around, walk away, and say, "Omae wa mo shindeiru," who would it be?
Wow, that's rough because who do I want to brutally kill is the question.
You can also choose. One of my earliest comments was that you looked like I'm having a brain fart. His face, Nanto Seiken dude. Wow, why can't I remember his name? The guy who slices with his fingers.
Ray.
In the second. Ray. Oh my god, I can't believe I forgot Ray's name. Yeah. But whatever. So if you had one Hokuto Hyakuretsu Ken to perform, it doesn't have to be a person. It couldn't be an inanimate object.
Man, I don't.
Or a thing.
I don't have anything that I want to. I don't have any people I want to kill. But I don't even think I have any things that I want to destroy so much. It's not even. I don't know, man. It's hard. That's hard because.
Well, we can leave that for episode 2 then.
Yeah, I think that's a tough question because I don't know. I think I don't hate enough stuff to to worry about to hate it enough to want to utterly destroy it.
Yeah, well, we'll leave that for next time then. Maybe
There,
something
there,
will pop up for someone.
there's a question in the comments.
Yeah, let's
Yeah,
see. The thing is, I could not get this doggone thing to the Q&A app to work, so I'll have to experiment with that later. But okay, we can take a question. Who's asking the question? What is the question? If
this
you would be
is
so kind.
from Casual Play on YouTube, who is also Eric. He's a good guy. Check out his channel if you haven't. But he's asking if you could recommend one game or series you find to be heavily overlooked and would perhaps help curve the general public into playing more games other than AAA titles. What would it be?
Oh, that's very easy. I would recommend the Atelier series.
Wow, why? I have only played
Because
like the first game in that series. Like I haven't played any of the recent ones, but I know you love them. So explain to us why we should play those because I don't really see the draw, but maybe you
here's
can give.
here's what attracts me to them. First of all, it's one of the few series that I can think of that actually gets better with every new entry. Like every new game adds a little something. They add either characters or recipes or a gameplay element that is really different from the previous one. And the second is the characters are just so lovable. And the Atelier games, they kind of come out in threes, which is what I don't know how you would classify them, but the three games come out and they are interrelated with each other. Then that saga sort of ends and then a new one begins. So there are three games on the PlayStation 3, Atelier Rorona, Totori, and Meruru. And those are interrelated. They take place in the same world, in the same kingdom, with much of the same characters, although they add different things in each game. And my personal favorite is Atelier Ayesha, which is released in 2013. It has two immediate sequels, which are not actually sequels because they have different characters, but they take place in the same world, which is Eschan Loji and Atelier Shali, which is the brand new one, which I have not gotten yet, but I'll have to get on that soon enough. So these are alchemy games in which you have a limited time, like say 3 years or usually it's 3 years to complete a certain task. For example, in Atelier Rorona, your shop is going to be closed in 3 years because you're not producing anything worthwhile. And the kingdom sent you an ultimatum that if you don't produce anything worthwhile in 3 years, they'll close your shop. In Atelier Totori, the main character is searching for her mother, so you have to find her or find something about her in that time lapse. In Atelier Meruru, it's your kingdom. You have to develop your kingdom and modernize it in 3 years. So every one of them has something different, and they have a time limit. So you can't just screw around without taking into account how many months and days you have left. And the alchemy system is super fun. At least it is super fun for me because you have different ingredients. You forage, find different ingredients in the forest, or you buy them in shops, and you make different items that you can either use or combine to make new items. And every time you go and search for ingredients, that takes time. Like maybe it takes a day or 2 days. So everything you do has to be kind of deliberate, although you do have enough time to do everything. But you can run out of time in the games. And another thing that I like about the games, and this is just a personal thing, is that the characters they're really lovable, and all the main characters are women, except for in Logi, which has two characters. But it's kind of it's not uncommon, but ever since Phantasy Star on the Master System, we've been seeing more female protagonists, like female characters. And these female characters in the Atelier games, they don't have any lofty ideals or pretentious objectives, much like this broadcast we're doing right now. No lofty ideals. They have to do something like in the introduction to Atorie Marie, which you reviewed on your channel. There are heroes doing heroic things and wizards doing wizard things and whatnot, but some people are just content with living their everyday life, and that's good enough for them. So it kind of sets the tone that those games are not really about like heroic feats or heroic deeds, but kind of like going about your everyday life and kind of just making it through. Although there are times when you travel to other places and you go on little quests, but it's nothing like tremendously grand or anything. And that's pretty much all I can say about the Atelier games. They are simple games. They're not very like graphically demanding or flashy, although they are very colorful. So they're kind of simple, lower budget games. But in order to play an Atelier game and complete it like 100% or get all the conversations and all the events with the characters, you would have to play it at least 6 or 7 times to get all the little details and paths. And if you're into trophies on the PlayStation, if you want to get all the trophies, I don't really care for trophies, but there are people who really love trophies. So if you want to get them, you have to play them many, many times. And for a $40 game that you have to play over and over, and that will be different every time you play, I mean, how can you say no to that? I know, and you're going to forgive me for saying this, I know a $65 game that you can only play once, and then you probably won't want to play it again, and it's called The Order 1886. And I'm not joining any bandwagons. I have actually played the Order 1886 because my one friend has it, and when I was over at his house in the north, in Valparaiso in Chile, for you folks that are in South America, you know where Valparaiso is. We actually played the Order 1886, and I honestly, and I'm not exaggerating, we beat that game in like 4 hours, and it was the most boring experience I could ever imagine. It started with the 6.5-minute cut scene, and you had like button prompts like press triangle or press square. Then I walked down the corridor for like 20 seconds, and there was another cut scene. And to be perfectly honest, I hated that game in like the first hour that I played it. So that's pretty much where I stand. There are cheaper games that have a lot more value and that don't have bugs or crippling glitches, and that you'll be playing over and over again. If you give them attention and your time, and you really get into them, despite the cutesy sort of art style or whatnot, then I think you will ultimately grow more as a player and be exposed to something that's very different. And that's my stance on that particular game series.
All right, that's pretty good, because like in my case, like I don't have a good answer for this. I'm glad you had a good one, because when I think about this question, when I think about the kinds of games I play, I think like I play a lot of games that I find to be really fun, except that I understand that a lot of them are not things that a lot of people would think are fun. So when it's the kind of thing where he's asking like what could help the general public get more into playing games, like not probably
Yeah.
don't play games I play. It's the kind of thing where like, you know, I like to play games that are complicated or and difficult. It's like the kind of thing where like you know, if I get a game that it's like where people are complaining it's too hard or it's like too complicated or there's too much going on, like that's probably a game I'm going to enjoy, especially if it's like a simulation or like some kind of strategy game. I'm going to be all over that because it's the kind of thing I want to play. But I think like I also understand that like a lot of people don't like that kind of thing. It's like not relaxing to them. It's not fun for them because it's more like a chore. And I think like a lot of the stuff that I'm into, especially right now, falls dead into that category. Like I'm playing Super Robot Tyson games right now. Um playing two simultaneously, and I'm playing Bloodborne over and over. It's like all those games, like, you know, the Super Robot Tyson games are like games where you have to manage like upgrading and stats for like 50 characters, and you have to like do strategy battles. It's not exactly a really accessible series. I mean, it's not
Bloodborne.
incredibly difficult though. What
Bloodborne
about
is a derivation of Kingsfield
yeah, I
and
mean,
Shadow Tower, so those are very niche games. And of course, Demon Souls and Dark Souls, which are a little bit more mainstream. Not really, but not many people remember Kingsfield or Shadow Tower, but more people remember Demon Souls.
yeah, but the thing, even though like Demon Souls and Dark Souls and now Bloodborne, like those games are, I mean, they're not unpopular games. Those are games that sell millions of copies. You know, you can't like call anything that's sold over a million copies like a hidden gem or anything. It's not really a it's not really a possibility. It's not really hidden if you're selling a million copies. But like
Mhm.
at the same time, I could see a lot of people buying Bloodborne out of hype and then just never finishing it because it's too
And
difficult.
yes, not being able to
Or
get into it because it seems like a game that you would have to kind of. It's not going to come to you. You have to get into the game and want to get into it. That it
yeah,
seems like
that's the
kind of like
thing.
Shadow Tower, Kingsfield.
Yeah, Kingsfield and Shadow Tower are like good examples of PS1 versions of the same thing, except like they didn't get popular. But those like Kingsfield is very much like a Dark Souls game. I mean, it's first person and it's ultra slow, but it still plays like the general story is a very Dark Souls story, or it's actually like almost exactly the same story as Demon Souls. And Shadow Tower is not dissimilar. I mean, it plays the same, but like there's different mechanics and there's guns and stuff. But um, those games are not, those are games I enjoyed, but like I wouldn't recommend them to anybody who like who plays games to relax or to have fun. Like if you're
Yeah,
just thinking like I just want to have a fun experience, like Kingsfield, not a good choice. Bloodborne, probably not a good choice. It's probably going to cause you more stress than fun. And I
yes.
think like what happens is like that's the kind of thing that I enjoy. Like it's like setting a problem in front of me and forcing me to work my way through it. And I think that like once you get through it, that's the payoff. And
Right.
I think a lot of people don't play games for that reason, but I do, and I find that like when I buy like almost all the games I've been playing recently fall right into that category. Like they're games that are like overly complicated or really big or have like require like strategic thinking or require like um learning a game well enough to work your way through difficult situations. Like those kind of things aren't appealing to the general public in a way that like will get them to like look at a game and say, yeah, this is much better than like the mindless shooting I'm doing in Call of Duty. I'll switch to this. Like
Yes.
it's not that kind of thing. And like the thing is like there are games that I play that are kind of fall into the easier category that are interesting though. um a good example of this, I think, Binary Domain, if you haven't played it.
I
um
have. Not only did I play Binary Domain, I 100%ed Binary Domain because I
yeah,
love that game.
Binary Domain is like, it's a third person shooter. Those are popular. um it's not an incredibly difficult game, but it's interesting. Like the characters are fun, the story is really cool, the world is amazing. The way the game is put together is great. I think like that game is like criminally overlooked, and it's not a AAA game, obviously, but it is the kind of game I think like when people give it a chance, they realize that like it's really good. But I don't think it fits as an answer to this question because like I think like if people who normally don't play AAA games play it, they would probably enjoy it, but it wouldn't like propel them to go look for more games like it because first there aren't really any, and second, it's just another third person shooter, and they could just go back to playing Gears of War or whatever. It's it's hard because the question itself is difficult because I think like I just don't play games that I think like when I look at them I think like, well, if more people knew about this it would be super popular. I think like if more people knew about it and they liked this kind of like crazy situation it's putting into you, it would be like minimally popular. It's those are the kind of games I play. So
Yes.
it's hard to, like really recommend something in that way.
It's kind of like my I have a few games that a lot of people will consider like almost lolicon, like Monobeno Pure Smile and Bullet Girls and Moe Chronicles is coming out next month. And like I like those games because most of them are funny. They have like this very funny sort of sense of humor and they're ridiculous. And I like the over the top sort of anime kind of sense of humor that is not 100% politically correct by like Western standards. But I find it really funny, and if somebody sees some of the games in my collection, they'll think, "Oh, this guy is a pervert." But not necessarily the case. I like them because they're really interesting. Like my sort of wacky, pseudo, almost lolicon kind of setting of the game, it actually has a very interesting story and it's very deeply rooted in like Japanese mythology. It's a really really good game, but it's a visual novel. You don't actually play the game. You kind of read the game and make a few choices here and there. So it's not much of a game, more of a visual novel.
Yeah, I
So I
think
understand. Yeah.
there are a lot of things like that though that they're just probably not appealing to people who aren't willing to get into them in a way that like normal people don't. And I like in the way that like your general person on the street is just going to look at that and be like, I don't like that, even though like they haven't actually touched it. So like they'll just look at it and just kind of blow it off because of the way it looks. And I can like it's the thing is that like the art style for something like Etrian Odyssey, for example, is pretty similar to what you're talking about. It is like kind of
Yes.
like it looks like everyone is like some kind of lolicon character. It's not exactly an appealing art style to people who would generally play hardcore first person dungeon crawling RPGs. So like I can even understand people who would normally like that kind of game looking at that game and being like, I'm kind of a little wary of playing this. And because like I understand that because I was that guy. Like I totally when it came out, I was like, I really like first person dungeon crawlers, but this is looking like um like I'm gonna be embarrassed to play it. And
I like Mado Monogatari.
yeah,
Curse of the Curry God, Sorcery Saga.
yeah, that's the thing. It's like, I mean, that game. If more people played it, they probably wouldn't like it. It's a great game, but I think like it's kind of a niche kind of genre altogether. But it that being said, like it looks like it's going to be like this cute, simple game for kids or whatever, like or it's just going to be like this kind of perv festival or whatever. But it's actually not
Festival.
like it's actually like a pretty hardcore um
Roguelike.
roguelike, yeah. So it's it's a little weird. Like I understand like their market. I know the people who are buying this kind of stuff but like, you know, it is a little off-putting for people, and I think a lot of Japanese games fall into that category because they're not making games for uh, the market that has like a different cultural understanding, I think. And then like, you'll get your people who will see those games and they'll just be like, well, that's crazy sexist. I'm not buying that. And you'll be like,
Yes.
you don't know what you're talking about first, but like, it's not. Just play it and you'll see. But I think like people can't get past like the way the thing looks over like the content itself.
Great. Well, that was a really great discussion, and to the person who asked the question, thank you very much. If there are any other questions, I don't know how to get this Q&A app to work,
Yeah.
but you can leave your questions and we can address them in the next episode, which will be maybe in another 3 months or so. Very occasional. I'm going to make this very occasional because I can't really do these very often, but whenever I have a chance, I'll shoot you a note and I'll let you know.
Yeah, that's fine. It doesn't really matter. Whenever you want.
So this was really great. Thank you. Thanks for showing up, and thanks for the awesome topics and the awesome discussion.
All right, it was indeed fun.
Maybe next time we could get SNES Mapper on here.
He can defend Nintendo. No, I'm just kidding.
Not necessarily. He's actually a pretty chill guy. And
no, I know.
Bruno, if you're listening, to
he's
this.
in the AGP chat with me on Facebook. So like we talk a bit. He's a good guy.
So if you're listening to this, Bruno, maybe next time you can join us and we can have a good time together. So, any closing comments, Joe? Any recommendations? Anything you'd like to add before we wrap this up?
I've got nothing. We talked about everything.
Okay, so next time we will figure out who you would perform the Hokuto Hyakuretsu Ken on, and tell them that they're already dead. So think about that. Okay.
All right.
That'll be all for tonight. And good fight, good night. And smell you later.